Welcome to Forbidden Love Story Channel, where secrets ignite and hearts shatter. Today we unravel Grace's tale, a quiet Tennessee weekend turned torrid affair with the one man she shouldn't have touched. A single kiss sparked passion, betrayal, and a devastating fallout that torched her marriage and family. How far can forbidden love pull you before it all burns down? Buckle up, folks. This rollercoaster of raw emotion and tough choices will hook you till the end. Now, let's dive into a story that'll leave you reeling. The world I'd always known, predictable, steady, and warm, shattered the moment I stepped into that sprawling Tennessee countryside. I'd taken so much for granted. The quiet rhythm of my life with my husband, Daniel, the way the days unfolded like a well-worn book. But that weekend, everything I thought I understood about love, loyalty, and desire twisted into something raw and unrecognizable. It began innocently enough, with a simple plan to escape the clamor of Nashville for a retreat to Daniel's father's cabin in the rolling hills near Chattanooga. Life, though, has a way of hurling surprises when you're least braced for them, and this was one of those jagged, breathtaking moments. Daniel and I rolled up to his father Robert's cabin just as dawn cracked open the sky, spilling golden light across the misty valleys. At 32, I was used to the chaos of city life, honking horns, endless deadlines, but this place felt like a sanctuary carved from dreams. Lush fields stretched endlessly, dotted with wildflowers that danced in the breeze, while towering oaks whispered secrets older than time itself. The air buzzed with the cheerful trill of birds, a symphony of peace that drowned out my restless thoughts. Robert's cabin perched atop a gentle slope, its weathered wood blending into the landscape, surrounded by a garden bursting with vibrant blooms, roses, lavender, and daisies swaying in quiet harmony. I'd always pictured Robert, now 61, as a frail shadow of a man, worn thin by years and solitude. How wrong I was, how devastatingly, thrillingly wrong. The screen door creaked open, and there he stood, Robert, radiating a vitality that hit me like a thunderclap. His broad shoulders filled out a faded flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal sinewy arms tanned by the sun. Jeans hugged his lean frame, and his silver-streaked hair caught the morning light, framing a face etched with rugged charm. His eyes, a piercing hazel, sparkled with a mischief I hadn't expected, and his grin, wide, genuine, and disarming, unlocked something restless inside me. I froze, my breath snagging in my chest as he bounded down the steps to greet us. This wasn't the tired old man I'd imagined. This was someone alive, magnetic, and dangerously captivating. "Hey, Pops!" Daniel, 35 and perpetually distracted by his architect's mind, flung his arms around his father in a bear hug. His voice carried that easy warmth I'd fallen for years ago. "How you holding up out here?" "Good, son, real good," Robert replied, his voice a rich, gravelly drawl that rolled over me like a slow-moving river. "Glad you all made it. How was the drive?" "Long," Daniel groaned, casting me a sidelong glance as he rubbed the back of his neck. "Traffic was a nightmare out of Nashville. Grace, you okay?" I nodded, forcing a smile to mask the tremor rippling through me. "Yeah, just tired. It's beautiful here, though." My words felt flimsy, inadequate against the storm brewing in my chest as I stole another look at Robert. He caught my gaze, and for a fleeting second, something unspoken flickered between us, sharp, electric, and forbidden. "Come on, Grace, let me show you the place," Robert said, his tone light but laced with an invitation I couldn't ignore. Daniel waved us off. Already lost in some conversation about blueprints and permits, his voice fading as Robert led me toward the cabin. I trailed him, my sneakers sinking into the soft earth, my senses drowning in the scent of pine and blooming honeysuckle. Inside, the cabin glowed with rustic warmth, wooden beams overhead, a stone fireplace crouching in the corner, and shelves lined with books that hinted at a life well lived. but it was the garden that stole my breath when we stepped back outside. "Want to see something special?" Robert asked, his eyes glinting with pride as he gestured toward the sprawling flower beds. I nodded, captivated, and followed him into a world exploding with colour and life. Roses climbed trellises in fiery reds and tender pinks, while bees hummed lazily around clumps of lavender. The air felt thick with possibility, and Robert's presence beside me pulsed with an energy that made my skin prickle. "This garden was a mess when I got here," he said, crouching to brush his fingers over a velvety petal. "Me and Clara, my wife, she's gone now, spent years taming it, turned it into our little Eden." His voice softened, heavy with memory, and I caught the flicker of sorrow in his eyes. It tugged at me, stirring a tenderness I hadn't expected. "It's stunning," I murmured, my gaze sweeping over the orderly chaos of blooms. "You've got a gift. I love how alive it feels." He straightened, his smile returning, warm, unguarded, and dizzying. "Thanks, Grace, means a lot. We poured our hearts into this, still do in a way. Keeps her close." His words hung there, fragile and honest, and I felt them sink into me, stirring a quiet ache. He wasn't just Daniel's father anymore. He was Robert, grieving, vibrant, and impossibly real. We wandered the paths, our footsteps crunching on gravel, our conversation flowing like a creek after rain. He told me stories of Clara's laugh, of the summers they'd spent digging in the dirt, of the life they'd built brick by brick. I listened, enthralled, my guard slipping with every word. His openness cracked something inside me, a longing I couldn't name. By the time we circled back to the cabin, the sun blazed high, and Daniel was still buried in his work, oblivious to the shift quaking through me. "Rest up before supper," Robert suggested, his voice dipping low as he glanced at me. "Grace, want to help me in the kitchen later? Nothing fancy, just something light." "I'd love to," I replied, my pulse racing as I met his gaze. It was a simple offer, but it felt like a thread pulling me closer to something vast and uncharted. As he disappeared inside, I stood there, the garden humming around me, my heart pounding with a truth I wasn't ready to face. This weekend, this place, this man, it was all spiraling into something I couldn't control. And deep down, beneath the guilt and the fear, a reckless part of me didn't want to. The Tennessee air hung thick with the scent of cedar and honeysuckle as the first day bled into evening, wrapping the cabin in a hush that felt both sacred and suffocating. I'd come here seeking respite, a quiet escape from the relentless churn of Nashville's concrete jungle. But what I found instead was a restless stirring, a wild, untamed pulse that thrummed beneath my skin every time Robert's hazel eyes locked onto mine. Daniel, my anchor, my husband, sat hunched over his laptop in the corner of the living room, his brow furrowed as he muttered about structural loads and deadlines. At 35, he was a man tethered to his work, his dreams sketched in blueprints rather than flesh and blood. I loved him. God, I did. But that love felt distant now, a faint echo swallowed by the vastness of this moment. Robert's presence filled the cabin like a storm cloud rolling over the hills, unpredictable, charged, and impossible to ignore. At 61, he carried the weight of his years with a grace that defied logic, his broad shoulders unbowed, his voice a low rumble that resonated deep in my chest. I'd caught myself watching him all day, the way his hands moved with quiet confidence as he tended the garden, the way his laugh, rich and unrestrained, spilled out when Daniel teased him about some old family story. Each glance chipped away at the walls I'd built around myself, leaving me raw, exposed, and trembling with a hunger I didn't dare name. "Grace, how about we let that fire warm us up tonight?" Robert's voice sliced through the stillness, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. He stood by the stone fireplace, a stack of logs cradled in his arms, his flannel shirt stretched taut across his back. The golden light of the setting sun streamed through the window, painting him in hues of amber and shadow, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. His suggestion was casual, innocent, or so I told myself, but the way his eyes lingered on me, warm and searching, sent a jolt of heat racing down my spine. "Sounds perfect," I managed, my voice catching as I forced a smile. Daniel grunted his approval without looking up, his fingers tapping a staccato rhythm on the keys. "You two go ahead. I've got a deadline breathing down my neck." Robert nodded, unfazed, and knelt to coax the fire to life. The crackle of kindling filled the room, a sharp primal sound that mirrored the chaos igniting inside me. I sank into a worn leather armchair, its cushions swallowing me as I watched him work, each movement deliberate, steady, mesmerizing. The flames leapt higher, casting flickering shadows across his face, highlighting the lines etched by time and loss. He poured 2 glasses of red wine from a bottle on the mantel, the liquid glinting like blood in the firelight, and handed one to me. Our fingers brushed, a fleeting graze that seared through me, and I clutched the glass tighter to steady my shaking hands. "Here's to quiet nights," he said, raising his glass, his voice a velvet murmur that wrapped around me like a blanket. I echoed the toast, the wine tartaned bold on my tongue, and settled deeper into the chair, the warmth from the hearth seeping into my bones. The room glowed, intimate and cocoon-like, the fire's golden dance softening the edges of everything, except the tension coiling between us. "Doesn't get much better than this, does it?" Robert mused, easing onto the sofa across from me. He stretched out, one arm draped over the backrest, his posture relaxed yet commanding. "Clara used to say this old place could talk if you listened hard enough, full of memories, every crack in the wood." His words carried a weight, a tender ache that tugged at me. I leaned forward, drawn in despite myself. "How'd you two meet?" I asked, my curiosity genuine, my voice soft as if afraid to shatter the fragile peace. He took a slow sip of wine, his gaze drifting to the flames, and I watched his face soften, his eyes glazing with a far-off shimmer. "Back in college, at some rowdy frat party in Knoxville," he began, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I was 20, full of big ideas and bigger ego. She was sitting on a porch swing, paint smudged on her cheek from some art project, laughing at something silly. One look at her and I was gone. She had this light, bright, fierce, like she could see right through me, made me feel like I'd stumbled onto something worth keeping." "That's beautiful," I said, my chest tightening as I pictured them. Young, reckless, alive. "What happened after that?" "We were inseparable," he continued, his voice dipping into a reverent hush. "Travelled all over, camped in the Smokies, drove down to New Orleans just 'cause we could. Every minute with her felt like a gift. She was my North Star, Grace. Kept me steady when I didn't even know I was lost." He paused, his jaw tightening, and the sorrow in his silence hit me like a punch. When she passed, I thought I'd lose that too. But this place, this fire, these walls, it's where I still feel her. His honesty cracked me open, spilling a flood of empathy and something darker, something greedy. I wanted to reach for him, to soothe that quiet pain, but I stayed rooted, my fingers digging into the armrest. "That must have been so hard," I whispered, my throat thick. "I can't imagine losing someone like that." "It was hell," he admitted, his eyes meeting mine, raw and unguarded. "Some mornings I still wake up thinking she'll be there, smiling at me over coffee. Then it hits all over again. But I've learned to hold on to what we had, grateful. You know, keeps me sane." His vulnerability was a blade, slicing through my defenses. I nodded, swallowing hard, and the air between us thickened, charged with an intimacy that felt both sacred and perilous. We talked on, the fire popping and hissing as the night deepened, our words weaving a fragile thread that pulled us closer. He told me about Clara's paintings, vivid canvases of sunsets and storms still hanging on the walls, and how she'd taught him to see beauty in the mundane. I shared snippets of my life, my love for running, my quiet dreams of writing, and he listened, really listened. his gaze steady and warm, like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. The wine dwindled, the bottle nearly empty, and the room grew smaller, the space between us shrinking with every heartbeat. I felt it, the pull, the ache, the reckless need clawing at me. I tried to smother it, to cling to the safe harbour of Daniel's love, but Robert's presence was a tide, relentless and consuming. He shifted, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees, and the firelight danced in his eyes, turning them molten. "You remind me of her, Grace," he said suddenly, his voice low and rough, slicing through the haze. "I know that sounds crazy, but there's something in you, your kindness, the way you see things. It's like glimpsing her all over again." My breath hitched, my heart slamming against my ribs. His words were a spark, igniting a fire I'd tried to douse all day. "In what way?" I asked, my voice trembling, my mind a whirlwind of fear and longing. He hesitated, searching for the right words, his gaze piercing me to my core. "Your eyes. They've got that same warmth, that quiet strength. And your smile, it's got this softness, this realness. Makes me feel alive, I guess, like I ain't just drifting through the days." The confession hung there, heavy and shimmering, and I felt my resolve crumble, a dam breaking under the weight of his gaze. My lips parted, a shaky breath escaping as I tried to respond. I don't know what to say. Robert, I just try to be me." "That's enough," he murmured, his voice a caress, and then his eyes dropped to my mouth. The air crackled, electric and alive, and I felt the shift, the moment tilting into something irreversible. My hand moved before I could stop it, reaching out to brush his cheek, the stubble rough against my palm. It was meant as gratitude, a simple thank you for his openness, but the touch ignited something feral. My heart thundered, loud and wild, as I leaned in, my lips grazing his cheek in a fleeting, tender kiss. The world stopped. His skin was warm, alive beneath my lips, and the sensation crashed over me, soft, dizzying, intoxicating. He froze, a sharp intake of breath, and then slowly, hesitantly, he turned, our eyes locked, his pupils dark and endless, and before I could pull back, his lips found mine. It was gentle, cautious, a whisper of a kiss, but it roared through me like a wildfire, fierce and unstoppable. My hands trembled, my mind screamed, but my body surrendered, melting into the heat of him. "Grace," he whispered against my lips, his voice ragged. "I didn't mean for this to happen so fast." I flushed, reality slamming back like a cold wave. "I'm sorry," I stammered, pulling away, my chest heaving. I shouldn't have—" "No," he interrupted, his hand catching mine, his touch firm yet tender. "Don't apologize. I felt it too, something real." His words anchored me, even as guilt clawed at my throat. I stared at him, his face a map of surprise and longing, and knew we'd crossed a line, fragile, forbidden, and alive with possibility. The fire crackled on, oblivious to the storm we'd unleashed, and I felt the weight of it settle into my bones. This wasn't just a moment. It was the beginning of something vast, something that could shatter everything I'd ever known. The cabin pulsed with an unspoken weight as the second night unfurled, the Tennessee hills cloaked in a velvet darkness that pressed against the windows. The fire in the hearth roared, its golden tendrils licking the air, casting a warm, restless glow across the room. I sat on the same leather sofa I'd claimed the night before, my fingers tracing the worn edges, my body taut with a nervous energy I couldn't shake. Daniel had vanished into his work again, his silhouette hunched over a desk in the next room, a faint murmur of frustration escaping him as he wrestled with some architectural conundrum. At 35, he was a man consumed by deadlines, by ambition, leaving me adrift in this quiet storm with Robert. Robert moved with a quiet grace, stoking the fire until it blazed, the crackle of logs a sharp counterpoint to the thudding of my heart. At 61, he was a force, steady, weathered, and achingly alive, his presence filling the space like the scent of pine after rain. I'd spent the day orbiting him, stealing glances as he repaired a fence or hauled wood, each flex of his arms under that flannel shirt stirring a restless heat in me. Now, as he settled beside me on the sofa, the distance between us shrank to a fragile thread, taut and trembling with possibility. He handed me a glass of wine, deep red, shimmering like a secret, and our fingers brushed again, a fleeting spark that jolted through me, fierce and unyielding. "Another night by the fire," he said, his voice a low rumble, rough-edged and warm, like gravel smoothed by a river. His hazel eyes caught the light, glinting with a softness that made my breath hitch. "Feels good, don't it?" "Yeah," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, my throat tight with the weight of everything unsaid. The wine burned on my tongue, sharp and bold, but it couldn't drown the chaos swirling inside me. Guilt, longing, a reckless need that clawed at my chest. I shifted closer, drawn by an invisible pull, the heat of his body radiating through the inches between us. We talked, our words weaving a delicate tapestry, light at first, about the garden, the stars blinking through the window, the way the hills seemed to breathe at night. But the conversation turned, dipping into deeper waters, and I felt the shift, a tide rising beneath us. Robert leaned in, his elbow resting on the back of the sofa, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You ever think about what pulls people together, Grace?" he asked, his tone hushed, introspective, as if he were peeling back layers of himself. "I've been wondering lately how someone can walk into your life and turn everything upside down without even trying." My pulse quickened, a wild drumbeat echoing in my ears. His words were a mirror, reflecting the turmoil I'd been wrestling with since we arrived. I don't know," I stammered, my voice trembling, my eyes darting to his. "Sometimes it just happens, right? Like a spark you can't put out." He nodded, slow and deliberate, his lips curving into a faint, wistful smile. "That's it, exactly. A spark." He paused, his gaze dropping to the wine in his glass, then back to me, piercing and unguarded. "You've got that. Grace, something about you. It's like Clara's still here, whispering in the room. I can't shake it." The air thickened, heavy with the ghosts of his past and the fire of this moment. My chest tightened, a flood of emotions crashing over me, flattery, fear, a dizzying ache that threatened to swallow me whole. "What do you see in me?" I asked, my voice raw, my hands trembling as I set the glass down, afraid it might shatter in my grip. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek, his eyes tracing my face like a painter memorizing a canvas. "It's your heart," he murmured, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. "The way you listen, the way you care, there's a light in you, gentle, fierce, real. Makes me feel like I ain't alone in this big, empty world." His words struck me like lightning, electric and shattering, splitting me open. I felt naked under his gaze, every wall I'd built crumbling to dust. My lips parted, a shaky breath escaping as I tried to anchor myself, but the pull was too strong, too visceral. "Robert, I started, but the words dissolved as his eyes flickered to my mouth, dark and hungry, and the room tilted. The fire's heat, nothing compared to the inferno igniting between us. Time slowed, the world narrowing to the space where our breaths mingled. My hand lifted, trembling, and brushed his jaw, the stubble rough and grounding against my fingertips. It was meant as a gesture, gratitude, connection, but it erupted into something more, a fuse lighting a powder keg. My heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm as I leaned in, my lips grazing his cheek in a soft, impulsive kiss. The sensation roared through me, his skin warm, alive, a current that jolted me to my core. He stiffened, a sharp inhale, and then turned, slow and deliberate, his eyes locking onto mine, deep and stormy. Before I could retreat, before guilt could claw me back, his lips found mine. a gentle, hesitant press that exploded into something wild and consuming. The kiss was tender, yet fierce, a collision of longing and restraint, and I melted into it, my hands fisting in his shirt, my body trembling with the force of it. His breath was ragged against my mouth, his touch a lifeline in the chaos, and for that fleeting moment nothing else existed. No Daniel, no rules, just us. Tangled in a fire we couldn't douse. "Grace!" he rasped, pulling back just enough to speak, his voice thick with shock and want. "I didn't mean to let it go this far." I flushed, my chest heaving, reality crashing back like a cold wave against a burning shore. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my hands dropping, my mind reeling. I didn't plan that." "No," he said, his hand catching mine, his grip firm and trembling. "Don't say sorry. I felt it too, something true." His eyes searched mine, a mix of wonder and regret, and I saw it. The same storm raging in him, the same line we'd crossed. The fire crackled on, oblivious to the wreckage we'd just unleashed, and I sat there, breathless, my lips tingling with the memory of his, my heart a battlefield of guilt and exhilaration. We'd lit a match, and now the flames were spreading, uncontrollable, dangerous, and impossibly alive. The morning sun clawed its way through the curtains, spilling pale light across the hardwood floor of Robert's Tennessee cabin, but its warmth couldn't pierce the icy dread coiling in my chest. I woke with a heaviness that pinned me to the bed, my body restless, my mind a churning sea of regret and longing. At 32, I'd built a life with Daniel, steady, predictable, a love carved from years of shared mornings and quiet nights. But last night, by the fire's treacherous glow, I'd let that life fracture, splintered by a kiss that still burned on my lips, a reckless, searing memory of Robert's touch. The guilt gnawed at me, sharp and relentless, a beast I couldn't outrun, and yet beneath it simmered something darker, a yearning I couldn't bury. I rolled over, the sheets tangling around me, and tried to claw back the piece of yesterday, but the echo of Robert's voice, low, tender, unraveling, haunted every corner of my thoughts. His hazel eyes, stormy with want, flashed behind my closed lids, and my stomach twisted, a nauseating blend of shame and exhilaration. How had I let this happen? How had I betrayed Daniel, my husband, my rock, for a moment of weakness with his father? The cabin, once a haven of rustic charm, now loomed foreign and accusing, its wooden walls whispering judgments I couldn't silence. I dragged myself from bed, my legs unsteady, and shuffled to the kitchen, the scent of coffee bitter and grounding. Daniel was already there, hunched over his laptop at the table, his dark hair tousled from sleep. At 35, he was a man of focus, his world built on lines and angles, oblivious to the chaos I'd unleashed. "Mornin', babe," he mumbled, not looking up, his voice a lifeline I didn't deserve. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah," I lied, my throat tight, my hands trembling as I poured coffee I wouldn't drink. "You?" He grunted something vague, lost in his work, and I seized the chance to retreat, to shield myself from his unsuspecting gaze. Every glance at him stabbed me deeper, his trust, his love, a mirror to my betrayal. I couldn't face Robert either, not with the heat of his lips still branded on mine, so I fled to the mundane, cooking, cleaning, anything to drown the storm raging inside. The day stretched into a blur of avoidance. I scrubbed dishes until my knuckles ached, swept floors that didn't need sweeping, my movements mechanical, desperate to outpace the guilt clawing at my spine. Robert drifted through the cabin, his presence a shadow I couldn't escape, his voice calling to Daniel about some chore, his footsteps heavy on the porch. I kept my head down, my heart pounding, dodging his orbit like a moth fleeing a flame. But the garden, that vibrant sprawl of roses and lavender, beckoned me by afternoon, a fragile refuge where I could breathe, where I could hide. I sank onto a wooden bench, a book trembling in my hands, its pages a blur I couldn't read. The air buzzed with the hum of bees, the scent of earth and blooms thick and soothing, but my chest remained a battlefield. Guilt warring with the ache of what I'd felt in Robert's arms. The kiss replayed, relentless and vivid. The roughness of his stubble, the softness of his lips, the way my body had surrendered, wild and unmoored. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it away, but it clung to me, a fever I couldn't shake. Grace. His voice cut through the stillness, low and tentative, and my head snapped up. Robert stood at the garden's edge, framed by the trellis. His flannel shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his silver-streaked hair catching the sun. At 61, he was a man forged by time, strong, weathered, and impossibly magnetic. And the sight of him sent a jolt through me, sharp and unwelcome. His hazel eyes, shadowed with tension, locked onto mine, and I felt the air thicken, charged with everything we couldn't unsay. I stood, my book tumbling to the grass, my heart a frantic drumbeat. "Robert, My voice faltered, brittle and small, as he stepped closer, his boots crunching on the gravel path. I wasn't ready for this, wasn't ready to face the wreckage we'd made, but his presence pinned me, inescapable and raw. "Can we talk?" he asked, his tone soft but insistent, his hands flexing at his sides as if fighting some inner war. I nodded, my throat dry, knowing avoidance was a coward's game I couldn't keep playing. We sat on the bench, the wood creaking under our weight, and the silence stretched, heavy, fraught, a chasm we'd dug with our own hands. He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the roses swaying in the breeze, and when he spoke, his voice trembled, laced with a vulnerability that pierced me. "Grace, I owe you an apology. Last night, I didn't mean for it to spiral like that. I got caught up and I shouldn't have let it happen." Relief flooded me, cool and fleeting, only to crash against a tide of guilt and confusion. "No, Robert, it's not just you," I said, my words tumbling out, shaky and urgent. "I kissed you first. I started it. I'm the one who's sorry. I can't stop thinking about Daniel, about how wrong this is." He turned to me then, his eyes searching mine, deep and anguished, and the sorrow in them mirrored my own. "I know," he murmured, his voice rough with regret. "I've been wrestling with it all day, how it felt, how it shouldn't have. But I can't lie to you, Grace. There's something here, something I can't ignore, and it's tearing me up." His confession hit me like a fist, raw and unfiltered, and I felt my resolve waver, a fragile thread snapping under the weight of his words. My hands clenched in my lap, my nails biting into my palms as I fought the pull, the reckless, aching need that surged every time he spoke. "Robert, I feel it too," I admitted, my voice breaking, my chest tight with a storm of emotions. "But it's a mistake. I've been thinking about Jack, Daniel I mean, all day, and I can't do this to him. I can't let it ruin us." He nodded, slow and pained, his jaw tightening as he absorbed my words. "I don't want that either," he said, his tone heavy, resolute. "I don't want you carrying this guilt, Grace. We got swept away, both of us, and I'm struggling too. But you're not alone in this. It ain't your fault." His reassurance was a balm, soothing and bittersweet, but it couldn't erase the truth. We'd crossed a line, and the fallout loomed like thunder on the horizon. I looked at him, his face etched with the same torment tearing me apart, and felt a pang of something fierce, gratitude, longing, despair. "How do we go forward?" I asked, my voice small, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. "How do we fix this?" He exhaled, a ragged sound, and reached out, his hand resting on my shoulder, warm, steady, a tether in the chaos. "We take it slow," he said, his gaze unwavering, tender yet firm. "We figure out what matters, to you, to me, to Daniel. No rushing, no hiding. But Grace, I don't want you blaming yourself. Whatever happens, we face it together." The simplicity of his touch, the quiet strength in his words, broke something in me, a dam of tension crumbling into dust. I nodded, my breath hitching, and we sat there, the garden humming around us, the silence thick with unspoken promises and uncharted fears. His hand lingered, a lifeline I didn't deserve. And I felt the shift, a turning point, fragile and fraught, where we'd laid bare our souls and acknowledged the mess we'd made. The sun dipped lower, painting the hills in shades of amber and shadow, and I knew this moment would haunt me. Robert's voice, his touch, the guilt and the pull warring in my chest. We'd opened a door we couldn't close, and though the path ahead was murky, tangled with thorns, I couldn't deny the truth. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a reckoning, and it would change everything. The Tennessee night pressed against the cabin like a heavy hand, the air thick with the scent of pine and the distant hum of crickets. Inside, the silence was suffocating, a fragile veneer stretched taut over the chaos I'd unleashed. I'd spent the day teetering on a razor's edge, Robert's tender words in the garden echoing in my skull, my guilt a relentless shadow stalking every step. At 32, I'd never known a shame so visceral, a dread so bone-deep, and yet the memory of his kiss, fierce, forbidden, alive, clung to me like a fever I couldn't break. Daniel, my husband, my tether moved through the house oblivious, his focus locked on his work, his trust in me a blade, twisting deeper with every glance. I sat on the couch, my phone a cold weight in my hand, its screen glowing with unread messages I'd ignored in my haze of avoidance. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting faint shadows that danced like ghosts across the walls. Daniel had retreated to our room earlier, his footsteps heavy with exhaustion, leaving me alone to wrestle with the wreckage I'd made. I swiped the screen, my heart lurching as Robert's name appeared. A single message, sent hours ago, pulsing with a tenderness that stole my breath. Grace, last night was real. I can't stop thinking about you, about us. I don't know what this means, but I need you to know I'm here. The words seared me, a mix of solace and poison, and I clutched the phone tighter, my chest heaving as guilt and longing collided in a brutal storm. Footsteps thudded behind me, sharp and deliberate, and I spun around, my pulse spiking. Daniel stood in the doorway, his silhouette rigid, his face flushed with a fury I'd never seen. At 35, he was a man of quiet strength, broad-shouldered, steady, but now his dark eyes blazed, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. He held his phone in a white-knuckled grip, the screen's light illuminating a shadow of betrayal that stopped my heart cold. "Grace," he said, his voice a low tremor, jagged with pain. "We need to talk. I just found something I can't unsee." My legs turned to water, a sickening dread pooling in my gut as I stumbled to my feet. "What do you mean?" I croaked, my voice frail, my mind racing to grasp the cliff I was tumbling over. He stepped closer, his breath ragged, and thrust the phone toward me. There, on the screen, was Robert's message, not mine, but a mirror of it, sent to Daniel by mistake. "Son, I need to tell you something. Grace and it wasn't planned, but it happened. I'm sorry." The words glared back at me, stark and damning, and I felt the floor drop away, my world shattering in a single merciless blow. "Daniel, I started, my voice cracking, my hands reaching out as if I could claw back the truth. Tears stung my eyes, hot and frantic, but he cut me off, his voice rising, raw and wounded. "How could you?" he roared, his face contorting with anguish, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "How could you do this to me, to him, to us? My own father, Grace, what the hell were you thinking?" His words were a lash, each one striking deeper, flaying me open until I stood there, trembling, exposed. "I can explain," I stammered, my voice a broken whisper, my hands shaking as I grasped for something, anything to hold on to. "It wasn't supposed to happen, it got out of control. I'm so sorry, Daniel, I never meant—" "Stop!" he snapped, his hands slicing the air, his chest heaving as he fought to breathe through the betrayal. Don't you dare say you didn't mean it. You kissed him, Grace. You let this happen. I trusted you, both of you, and you tore it all apart. His voice cracked, a sob breaking through the anger, and the sound gutted me. A dagger of my own making plunged into his heart. Tears streamed down my face, blurring him into a haze of pain and fury. I know I messed up, I choked out, my knees buckling as I sank back onto the couch. I was confused, lost. I don't know why I let it go that far. I hate myself for it, Daniel. Please, just let me— There's no fix in this, he interrupted, his tone flattening into something cold, final, as he leaned against the wall, his shoulders slumping. I can't even look at you right now. My dad, my own damn father, and you. How do I live with that? He scrubbed a hand over his face, his breath hitching, and I saw the war in him, rage battling heartbreak, love crumbling under the weight of my betrayal. I don't know what to say, I whispered, my voice dissolving into sobs, my body curling in on itself as the enormity of my actions crashed over me. I was wrong, so wrong. I'll do anything to make it right. He stared at me, his eyes hollow, his face a mask of exhaustion and despair. There's no making this right, he said quietly, the fight draining from him, leaving only a shell of the man I'd loved. I need to know why, Grace. What pushed you to this? What was so broken that you'd destroy us? I shook my head, my tears falling unchecked, my voice a frail thread. I can't justify it. I was selfish, stupid. I found comfort where I shouldn't have. It's my fault, Daniel, all of it. I'm so sorry. He stood there, silent, his gaze cutting through me like glass, and I felt the rift widen, a chasm I'd carved with my own hands. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, resolute. I can't do this anymore. I need time, space, to figure out what's left, but I can't stay here with you, not after this. I nodded, my chest caving in, the finality of his words a hammer to my fracturing world. He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the night, leaving me alone on the couch, the embers of the fire mocking me with their dying glow. I'd shattered everything, his trust, our home, my own soul, and now the pieces lay scattered, jagged and irreparable, a testament to the ruin I'd wrought. The rain hammered Chattanooga's streets, a relentless drumbeat against the cafe windows, mirroring the tempest raging in my soul. I'd fled the cabin days ago, leaving behind Daniel's shattered trust and the Tennessee hills that had witnessed my unraveling. At 32, I'd landed in a cramped apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes and a hollow hope that Robert could be my lifeline, a chance to salvage something from the wreckage I'd made. The memory of his touch lingered, warm and treacherous, fueling a fragile dream that we could build anew. But as I stepped into the cozy cafe, the air thick with the scent of coffee and damp wool, that dream teetered on the edge of collapse. Robert sat by the window, his silhouette stark against the grey blur outside, his silver-streaked hair catching the dim light. At 61, he was still striking, broad-shouldered, weathered, a man carved from the earth. But his face was taut, his hazel eyes shadowed with a weariness that sank my heart. I slid into the seat across from him, my hands trembling, my pulse a frantic stutter. "Hey, Robert," I said, forcing a smile, my voice thin against the clatter of cups and rain. "Thanks for meeting me." He nodded, his gaze meeting mine, steady, cold, a wall I hadn't expected. "Hey, Grace," he replied, his voice flat, stripped of the warmth I'd clung to. "Hope you weren't counting on too much from this." His words landed like a slap, sharp and jarring, and I felt my chest tighten, a flicker of dread igniting in my gut. I needed to see you," I said, my tone pleading, my fingers twisting the edge of my sleeve. "After everything, Daniel, the cabin, I thought we could talk about what's next, about us." My voice cracked, exposing the raw hope I'd nursed, but his sigh, deep and burdened, snuffed it out. Grace, he began, his eyes drifting to the rain-slicked glass, his jaw tightening as if wrestling some unseen weight. I've been thinking hard about all this, about what we did, what it cost. I can't keep going down this road. My family, Daniel, my son, means more to me than anything. I can't let this tear that apart, no matter how messy it's already gotten. His words sliced through me, cold and final, a blade severing the thread I'd clung to. My throat burned, tears prickling as I fought to hold them back. "But what about us?" I whispered, my voice trembling, my hands clenching the table's edge. "We had something real, Robert. I thought, I hoped, it could be enough." He looked at me then, his gaze softening with regret. A flicker of the man who'd kissed me by the fire. "It was real," he said, his tone low, pained. "I felt it too, every damn second. But I can't ignore what it's done. Daniel's my blood, Grace. I've got to put him first, even if it means letting you go." His voice broke, a crack in his resolve, but his eyes held firm, unyielding. The cafe faded, the chatter, the clinking mugs, leaving only the ache of his rejection, a hollow void swallowing me whole. "I get it," I murmured, my voice barely audible, my chest caving under the weight of loss. "I just wanted something different." We sat in silence, the rain a mournful chorus, each second stretching into an eternity of unspoken goodbyes. When we stood, he pulled me into a brief, trembling embrace, his warmth a cruel echo of what I'd lost. "Take care, Grace," he said, his eyes glistening, and I turned away, stepping into the downpour, the cold biting my skin as the emptiness settled in. Robert was gone, Daniel was gone, and I was alone, adrift in a storm of my own making, with nothing left but the rain to mourn with me. The rain battered my Chattanooga apartment, a relentless wail against the windows, mirroring the storm that had ravaged my soul. At 32, I sat alone, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, relics of a life with Daniel I'd torched with my own hands. The silence was deafening, a hollow void where laughter and love once thrived. I'd lost everything, my husband, my home, Robert's fleeting promise, leaving me stranded in a wasteland of regret. The memory of that kiss, once a wildfire of thrill, now smouldered as a bitter ash, a reminder of the chaos I'd sown. Each morning dragged me awake, my body heavy with an emptiness that gnawed at my bones. Runs through the park, once shared with Daniel, became solitary penance, each step echoing what I'd shattered. Work offered no solace, just a clock to punch, a distraction from the guilt that clawed my chest. Friends drifted away, their distance a quiet verdict on my betrayal, and I understood. I'd raised not just a marriage, but a world. Nights stretched endless, the ceiling a blank canvas for my torment. Why had I chased that fleeting spark? How had I let it incinerate all I'd held dear? Sorting through old photos one evening, Daniel's grin, our dreams captured in faded ink, I crumbled, tears soaking the floor. I'd traded a steady love for a reckless whim, and the cost was a life unmoored, a heart scarred by my own folly. Robert's farewell had sealed it, his choice to save his son stripping away my last illusion. I was alone, the architect of my own ruin, grasping at shadows that offered no redemption. Looking back, I see it clear. That fleeting desire, innocent at first, spiraled into a catastrophe I couldn't outrun. I wish I'd known the price, wish someone had shaken me awake before I leapt. To you out there, hear this. Don't let a moment's thrill dictate your path. Pause, think, cherish the ones who anchor you, the bonds you've built brick by brick. A spark can warm or destroy. Choose wisely, because the flames you ignite might burn for years. I learned this the hard way. My scar's a map of mistakes I pray you'll avoid. Thanks for walking this rough road with me, folks. May your choices lead to light, not ashes. Here's to healing, to wiser days, and to holding tight what matters most. Take care, you all.